After one of the heaviest days of fighting since the start of the war, Israel reportedly has agreed in principle to the U.S.-Lebanon ceasefire proposal. The deal is not yet final, and until it is, the war with Hezbollah is only expected to intensify. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
Smoke rose from badly damaged buildings in Beirut's southern suburbs today after Israeli airstrikes hit the area. Lebanese media reports waves of airstrikes after the IDF ordered evacuations of 12 buildings in Dakhia, in the southern suburbs of the Lebanese capital. Ahead of the strikes, warnings were sent to civilians ordering them to evacuate to avoid injury. The Air Force hit 150 Hezbollah targets and advanced further into South Lebanon while killing dozens of Hezbollah terrorists. The 36th Division located weapons, launchers, underground infrastructure, and military compounds that posed a threat to northern Israel. Infantry and armored units established operational control in new areas of South Lebanon. The IDF said it's prepared to continue the war, further degrading Hezbollah positions in South Lebanon and its capabilities to attack and fire rockets and drones from further north. It's also ready to pull the troops out of South Lebanon when a ceasefire is declared and so ordered by the political decision makers.
The ceasefire could be close at hand, but in the meantime, the IDF continues destroying Hezbollah targets on the ground and in the air. Both the IDF and Hezbollah appear determined to continue attacking until the potential ceasefire deal is ready. More from ILTV's Steve Leibovitz.
The cabinet held consultations overnight to discuss details of the Lebanon ceasefire proposal. U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein is back in Washington after meetings in Beirut and Jerusalem reportedly brought Israel and Lebanon very close to an agreement. The cabinet discussions came after one of the most violent days of the war, as Israel was targeted with some 600 missiles while the Air Force pounded Beirut throughout the day. Hochstein reportedly told Israeli officials that this was the last chance to make a deal until the Trump administration comes into office on January 20th. The consultations were held with a few ministers and security officials and focused on remaining details. The meeting also focused on Israel's insistence that it get guarantees from Washington that it would be able to act if Hezbollah violated the agreement. The deal would be carried out in stages, with Hezbollah first removing its forces in South Lebanon to areas north of the Litani River. This would be followed by an IDF pullout from southern Lebanon and the entry of some 10,000 Lebanese army troops to ensure that Hezbollah does not return. An international body led by the U.S. will be tasked with monitoring the ceasefire. As part of the effort to get the agreement signed, former U.S. Ambassador to Israel Don Shapiro is due to arrive in Israel today to finalize the details.
And joining us now with more on the potential ceasefire and ongoing war in the north is Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserve Sarit Zehavi, founder and president of ALMA, specializing in Israel's security challenges on its northern border. Thank you for joining us today.
Good evening. Thank you.
So we still don't have all the details about the ceasefire agreement, but from what is taking shape, I mean, what do you make of this agreement? Does it truly address Israel's security concerns?
First and foremost, I want to say that we don't know exactly what's in this agreement. These are all different kind of reports that it's not happening till it's happening. But by what is being published, I think that too much attention is being given to Resolution 1701. And what we have learned from the past 18 years is that the two key players that were supposed to enforce the resolution, which is the Lebanese army and UNIFIL, actually did nothing around that. And this is something that must be solved.
Mm. And is now the right time for a ceasefire agreement, do you think?
Yes, in this respect, I do believe that both sides are interested in a ceasefire. I think, and I'm saying that from the most personal point of view as a resident of the North, I think we do want to go back to normality. I think that the IDF gained great achievements, military achievements against Hezbollah, degrading its capabilities on various fields, including killing the leadership of Hezbollah, killing more than 170 commanders of Hezbollah, eliminating big amounts of its rockets and pushing it away from the border. Yet, I think the main concern of the people here is the question whether Hezbollah will be capable of recovering. And that this is the key to any ceasefire, to make sure that Hezbollah is not recovering the capabilities after a while, and that there is somebody there to enforce it, whether it's Israel or anybody else. I know that we insist that it will be Israel, but there is a risk in this as well. If it will be Israel, the question is how long the ceasefire will last, and what does that mean for our daily lives here in the north?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you mentioned what happens the day after the ceasefire. You mentioned the Lebanese army. You mentioned UNIFIL. I mean, how can Israel truly trust the Lebanese army, the international community, in controlling Hezbollah when it has utterly failed to do so for the past 20 years?
There is only one way to build this trust, and this is if Lebanon will completely change its relationship with Hezbollah. Because what is happening today is that Lebanon is playing a double game, and we are negotiating with Nabia Berri while it is clear that Hezbollah is involved. There is no difference between Lebanese government and Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is a member of the Lebanese government officially, not below the surface. The minister of the government of Lebanon that is responsible for all these smugglings of Hezbollah, for the entrances and exits of the state of Lebanon, whether it's Hariri airport or the ground border crossings with Syria, is a Hezbollah member. So I think the third thing that should happen, and this is where the international community should be very much involved, is a change of relationship between the state of Lebanon and Hezbollah, designating it as a terrorist organization, and completely changing the situation within Lebanon itself according to Resolution 1559, that demands the disarmament of all militias in Lebanon, and not only 1701.
And, you know, we're still far from a ceasefire, close but far away. What do you see happening the day after? I mean, do you think that Israel's displaced citizens, the citizens of the north, do you think they will feel safe to return to their homes?
So again, the key question is whether we're going to see Hezbollah military operatives watching us, from the kitchen windows, just on the other side of the border, or they will not be able to come back. If they will be able to come back, the future of the north is very, how would I say it, unclear, and an understatement. I believe that many people will come back if they will be quiet, but not everybody. I believe that those who can afford living somewhere else and had no emotional connection, I will put it this way, to the north, may leave if the situation will not become better and if security will not be promised. And that's why it's so important to make sure that Hezbollah cannot recover. And we don't see anymore those sites over here. We don't see the capabilities to carry out those sites anymore.
All right, well, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, Sarit Zehavi, thank you so much for your analysis today. And of course, we hope that Israel's residents will be able to return home soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And along with news of a coming ceasefire, Israeli residents of the north were also treated with one of the few quiet nights since the start of the war, with no rocket or UAV intrusions detected for a 12-hour period. However, that quiet was deceptive, and Hezbollah renewed rocket and UAV attacks this morning. A UAV intrusion was detected in the western Galilee. It was shot down by the Air Force, and red alert sounded due to fears from falling interceptor fragments. The upper and western Galilee were targeted by about 20 rockets. Some were intercepted and others fell in open areas without causing injuries. Over 2 million Israelis were required to shelter yesterday in some of the most damaging strikes into Israel since the start of the war. 9 Israelis were injured by rocket impacts in 6 different locations in northern and central Israel. And in other news, the body of murdered Chabad emissary Rabbi Zvi Kogan was returned to Israel today for burial. While arrests have been made, it is still unclear who is behind his murder, which Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called an anti-Semitic terrorist attack. The details in the following report.
The murder of Rabbi Zvi Kogan in Dubai has sent shockwaves throughout Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the killing and expressed deep shock at what he called an abhorrent anti-Semitic terrorist attack.
מדינת ישראל תפעל בכל האמצעים ותמצה את הדין עם הרוצחים ושולחיהם. איש מהם לא ינקה. אני מאוד מעריך את שיתוף הפעולה עם איחוד האמירויות בחקירת הרצח. אנחנו נחזק את הקשרים בינינו, דווקא למול הניסיונות של ציר הרשע לפגוע ביחסי השלום בינינו. נחזק אותם ונפעל גם להרחיב את היציבות באזור.
Kogan was a 28-year-old Moldovan Israeli citizen and a Chabad emissary based in the UAE. He managed a kosher supermarket in Dubai called Ramon Market. The supermarket remained shut on Sunday. Kogan had been missing since Thursday, and after an intensive search, his body was found yesterday in the city of Al Ain, which borders Oman and is about 130 kilometers from Dubai. He leaves behind his wife, Rivki. The UAE has arrested 3 suspects in the case and has released their names and images. 28-year-old Olimpi Tohirovich, 28-year-old Mahmoud John Abdul Rahim, and 33-year-old Azizi Kamilovich. The authorities have yet to reveal many details on the suspects, except that they are reportedly Uzbek citizens. It still remains unclear whether the killers were operating on behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The Emirati ambassador to the United States issued a statement on the murder saying it was more than a crime in the UAE. It was a crime against the UAE, its values, and its vision. He said that the UAE welcomes everyone and embraces peaceful coexistence while rejecting extremism and fanaticism of every kind. He added that the UAE honors Zvi Kogan's memory by recommitting itself to these values.
And joining us now to discuss Israeli-Emirates relations in the wake of the anti-Semitic attack is Executive Director of Sharaka and Middle East Affairs Analyst Dan Feferman. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So many Israelis travel to Dubai and to Abu Dhabi regularly. In the wake of this attack, is it safe to be there now?
Yeah, first, I just want to say that I've spent a lot of time in the UAE, and I was very close with the Chabad community there and the rabbis. And this is just a tragic and shocking murder attack. Rav Kogan, Zichrono Livracha, and the entire Chabad community were known for their incredible generosity, their warmth, and they were unbelievable ambassadors for the Jewish people and for Israel in that sense. And they're beloved and welcomed by the entire UAE community in general. And so this is an especially tragic and difficult event, and my sympathies really go out to Rav Kogan's family, the entire Chabad community, the entire community of the UAE. In general, and I've said this after my many visits to the country, I think it's still the safest country or one of the safest countries to visit or to live in. And this just goes to show how deep and prevalent are the threats against Jews anywhere. There are radicalized Islamist terrorists, whether backed by Iran or acting with other terrorist groups, or individual actors who are radicalized everywhere. And so while the UAE has done a remarkable job compared to the rest of the region, and certainly compared to Europe these days or the West, in de-radicalizing, in promoting an extremely tolerant society, and in protecting vulnerable minorities, you see that such hate crimes can happen anytime, anywhere. And it's virtually impossible to have zero terrorist attacks or hate crimes.
And so what has been, the attitude of the United Arab Emirates and cooperation with Israeli authorities since this tragic event?
Broadly speaking, since the Abraham Accords, but even well before the Abraham Accords, there was very close security, intelligence, and diplomatic cooperation between the two. And so while I'm not privy to the exact diplomatic or security cooperation happening now, I would expect there to be nothing less than full cooperation and full transparency on this case as well.
Mm-hmm. And Rabbi Kogan was openly Israeli, visibly Jewish. Do you think that the attack against him was likely an effort to perhaps sabotage the good relations between Jews, between Israel and the United Arab Emirates?
Almost certainly. I think the October 7th attack was clearly the ongoing war with the Hezbollah, with the Houthis, with other Iran-backed proxies, and Iran itself directly attacking Israel on so many fronts, with Iran-backed radicals attacking Jewish communities and Israel-related targets in the West. This seems to be another attempt, I would say a desperate attempt, to sabotage the good relations between Israel and the UAE, to sabotage the accords, and also maybe to harm and intimidate, the good standing of the Jewish community in the UAE. Chabad emissaries are generally known as trailblazers. They were in the UAE, by the way, for years before the Accords, and I'm certain they won't allow themselves to be intimidated by this cowardly act. And we're seeing already very clear statements and actions from the UAE authorities, not only condemning this act, but taking swift action against the perpetrators. Within hours, 3 suspects of Uzbeki nationality were detained. And as my good friend and Emirati political commentator sent me right before this interview, Amjad Taha, he said these criminals will not see the sun again. And he sent a message to the beloved Jewish community of the UAE that the UAE will stand strong against every racist, against every anti-Semitic criminal, and the UAE will stand by the Jewish community. And that's something we're not seeing from any of the Western governments in which Jewish communities have been attacked recently.
All right, well, Dan Feferman, thank you so much for your analysis today.
Thanks for having me.
Israel has been accused by the United Nations and other international so-called human rights organizations of purposefully withholding humanitarian aid and starving the Gazan population. And the International Criminal Court has even gone so far as to issue arrest warrants against Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, saying they have committed, among other things, the war crime of using starvation as a method of warfare. This is, of course, false. Anyone who has been truly following the war this past year knows this is a ridiculous accusation. Just how ridiculous? Well, let's take a look at the numbers. Since the start of the war, Israel, through COGAT, which is the Israeli government body responsible for coordinating and facilitating humanitarian aid for Gaza, has facilitated the entry of over 2.2 billion pounds of humanitarian aid. That's over 1 million tons of aid to Gaza on 57,545 massive trucks. And food? Israel has facilitated over 872,000 tons of food on over 40,000 trucks into Gaza and over 50,000 tons of water. It also supplies water through water lines and water pumping facilities. Israel has also brought in over 27,000 tons of medical aid on over 2,700 trucks and has vaccinated Gazan civilian population against disease. Does that sound like genocide? Does that sound like purposeful starvation? When in the history of warfare has a country provided humanitarian aid and medical services to its enemy? But the UN alone has cried out famine and genocide countless times, as have the useful idiots on the streets of Western cities. They, of course, completely ignore the fact that Israel sends in the trucks, the food, the aid, only to have Hamas hijack them once they make their way into Gaza. Recently, 98 aid trucks were hijacked and the goods stolen. By who? The UN refuses to say. UNRWA and the UN have proven to be incompetent and unable to even properly deliver aid to Gazan civilians, their main job. So they place the blame on Israel. It's an easy out. But the numbers speak for themselves. The accusations against Israel, ludicrous. And I'll add, how much aid are the hostages receiving? There are still 101 hostages being held in Gaza. How much food is being delivered to them? How much medical care are they receiving? Which international organization is looking out for them? Sadly, we all know the answer. Now, moving on to some positive news, Shanghai Ranking has just released their academic institution ranking list. And wouldn't you know it, Israel is still ranked relatively high in various department categories. This, of course, comes as many students have put their studies on hold to serve in reserve duty or even had to stop their academic year altogether due to wartime challenges. Regardless of these circumstances, Israeli academia still stands strong. ILTV's Devo Klein has the full report.
11 Israeli academic departments have made it into the Shanghai Top 50 list, excelling in math, chemistry, and communications. Some of the rankings include Hebrew University at 14th globally for math, another being Hebrew University ranking 14th for communications, and the University of Haifa, the same university which is subject to non-stop red alert sirens and incoming rocket threat, placed 28th globally. In the highly profitable field of chemistry, the Weizmann Institute of Science just cracked the top 40, and the Technion Institute of Technology was placed 32nd in overall ranking. Math is currently Israeli academia's strong suit, performing exceptionally well compared to previous years. In 2020, only the Hebrew University was included in the top 50, ranked 25th in the world. However, this year, Hebrew U climbed to an astonishing 14th, with Tel Aviv University ranked 45th and the Weizmann Institute following closely behind at 46th. For the Shanghai ranking, over 500 academic institutions were ranked, highlighting Israel's achievements in academia despite the ongoing war threat. 3 Israeli universities even made the top 100 universities ranked worldwide in a ranking published in August.
And Israel's National Security Council has raised the threat level for Israelis traveling to Thailand to level 2. The council said that while the threat has not worsened, it is issuing the raised warning due to the persistence of the threat. In its recommendations, it stated that any Israeli staying in Thailand should avoid attending large events identified with Israel and should conceal all Jewish or Israeli symbols. It also advised Israelis not to update their location or travel plans on social media. The warning comes after a November 12th warning that called on Israelis to increase their awareness. And after the Mossad confirmed earlier this month that terrorists were planning to attack Israelis at a full moon party on the island of Kopangan, a favorite destination for Israelis. Thailand is a very popular destination for Israeli tourists, and it's now being added to the list of countries, including Australia and many Western European countries, with an increased threat level for Israelis.
Sagot Winery, where passion meets tradition. Nestled in the heart of Binyamin, our vineyards yield exquisite wines, crafted with generations of expertise.
And winter has officially arrived in Israel as overnight Mount Hermon was dusted with the first snow of the season, transforming the northern Golan Heights into a winter wonderland. ILTV's Ariela Lehiani has more.
Israel welcomed its first snow of the season overnight as Mount Hermon in the northern Golan Heights was blanketed with a light dusting of white. The picturesque snowfall marks the start of winter, with temperatures dropping below freezing across the region. According to the Israel Meteorological Service, light snow is expected to continue throughout the day in the northern Golan Heights as an unseasonable cold front sweeps through the area. Residents and visitors alike are bracing for more chilly conditions as the cold front lingers. This early snowfall brings hopes for a snowy season ahead, perfect for winter tourism and skiing enthusiasts.
Always lovely to see the first snow. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Rain showers are expected around most of the country tonight, with lows of around 9 degrees Celsius or 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see more rain showers alongside cloudy skies, seeing highs of about 16 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Ladar Gavelazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.